Okay, we're almost at the end, literally. We're gonna start here, the small intestine. Showed this picture earlier. Here's the stomach. There's the duodenum, short section. All of this represents the duodenum, and then the longest part is the ileum. And the ileum comes down here and connects to what's called the cecum, which is the beginning of the colon. And then there's the appendix, and then it would come up from there. Here are the small intestines. Here's the veins, the arteries down here, and it's showing a little bit of the lymphatic system. Let me get my mouse working, but you can see where they're all coiled around. And then up here at the top, so let's see, this is showing the ileum. This is the section, if you can tell on our little overhead over here, that's the duodenum. And what you kind of have to do, and we would do this in lab as well, we would take off the colon, and then sometimes this thing doesn't mind. There's the duodenum. You can see it's not very long. This is showing, it says the front, that's the back. There's the stomach. You see how it curls around, and when you can see it underneath here. It's not very, it's actually really short. The ileum is long, and then here's on this side is the duodenum. So it goes the duodenum, the duodenum, and then the ileum. And then the ileum actually comes down, and I'm gonna I'll show where it connects. You can kind of see it there. Here's the cecum, and you can see where in the back there the ileum comes along. There's actually something called an ileocecal sphincter that controls the passage into the cecum. The cecum is the side, and you can see it a lot of times. There's the appendix that's on the right side, but the ascending colon comes off of the cecum. So just a little overview of the small intestines. So the small intestine is where food is absorbed, and the inside lining looks like this. These are called villi. You can see there's this green thing is called a lacteal, but it's folded like this. You get more surface area that way. So I'm going to skip down, and when you get a chance, look at these. These PowerPoints are really good as far as explaining how the food absorption part works. So I showed you the duodenum, short section, that connects directly to the stomach. There's the pyloric sphincter that controls what goes into the duodenum. Duodenum is the middle section, and the ileum is the last part of it. And yeah, it's a little bit different, like it was saying here, the wall's thicker. There are different areas of absorption of food that take place throughout it. But here is what I was showing you. So blood capillaries, lymphatic vessels, and nerve fibers. And then what these are glands that are in the subcutaneous layer of the small intestine. Cover these in lab. So a crypt of Lieberkühn, or intestinal glands, they're at the bottom of the folds. I should have stayed where I was. So, let's go back up. Here we go. Yeah, it says intestinal crypts. Those are called the crypts of Lieberkühn, guy who discovered them. Down here, those are actually cut off. If you go down lower, and I don't believe it doesn't show them. There's something called Brunner's glands that are down here. But here is where the food is absorbed. So enzymes we've talked about so far, their goal is to get the food particles down to the smallest units. Here is the lining of the small intestine. These are called villi. You can see them here. There's a lacteal, artery, vein. But yeah, all the food is absorbed, food and some water. Water is absorbed in the stomach, the small intestine, and the colon, but all the food's absorbed in the small intestine, nowhere else. Yeah, Peyer's patches, we covered that with the lymphatic system. There are nodules scattered throughout the whole area. So here are the secretions of the small intestine. Remember, it does produce hormones, and it also produces a whole set of digestive enzymes. Secretin, showed you that, controls the release of sodium bicarbonate from the pancreas. Cholecystokinin, or CCK, controls bile release, but it also controls the pancreatic enzymes. And then here are all the enzyme secretions. Now, just remember, these are all embedded in this lining. So now I'm going to go back down to where I was. So here's a picture here. So this is it says the lumen of the small intestine. Here's the bloodstream. All the food that is eaten, it's going to eventually end up in the bloodstream. And then the body takes it where it's needed. You see here, it's showing how this is going across, and this gets a little more detailed than we want to cover, but see how it's passing over and then now it's being absorbed in the bloodstream? That's how it works with food. So here's the first example. Here is a polysaccharide. Now remember, amylase in the mouth, salivary amylase, and pancreatic amylase split polysaccharides into a disaccharide. We don't talk much about this. Oligosaccharides, which are like groups of 3 or 4. A disaccharide is 2. So in the lining of the small intestine, there are enzymes embedded there. For instance, it doesn't say here which one it's talking about. Sucrase. Sucrase is found here. Sucrase, and I'll show you. And I'll get back to this. So sucrase, maltase, lactase. Sucrase splits, sucrase splits, that should say sucrose, and it will, into glucose and fructose, 2 monosaccharides. Monosaccharides are small enough to be absorbed. Here's maltase, splits maltose into glucose and glucose. Lactase, which is a milk sugar, splits lactose into glucose and galactose. So on this picture, here's the lumen, there's a disaccharide, and then here's fructose. So it's showing the enzyme activity splitting this into these small units. These are called simple sugars, monosaccharides. And you see how they're being absorbed, and now they're going into the bloodstream. If it stays a disaccharide, it's too big. It cannot be transported across the cell wall. A person that's lactose intolerant, lactose stays a disaccharide. There's a problem with the enzyme lactase. And so it just sits there, and the microbes, and there are billions of microbes in this area, the microbes there break it down, and they produce acid and gas, and that would cause pain. So that's how this works. So all food is absorbed that way. It's why it has to be down to the simple units. Peptidases split the last bit of what are called peptides into amino acids, and I'll show you a grand summary with that. Intestinal lipase, there'll be something for this. It's a lipase enzyme. It splits triglycerides into fatty acids and glycerol. And in the end, it's the absorption in the small intestine. Here are all the food categories down into their simple units. So monosaccharides, amino acids, fatty acids, glycerol, and nucleotides. So water and electrolytes are also absorbed there. So that all happens in the small intestine. A lot of enzymes to learn. Okay, we're heading to the exit, heading to the end. So the large intestine. Now, the cecum is the beginning of that. Here's the colon. Colon has sections just like the small intestines do. That's the cecum, that part here, and it loves extreme close-ups. And then this part coming up is the ascending colon. Now, so the cecum, and I've covered this before, there's where the ileum, you can see our little overhead. I'll move this over here. There's the ileum. See where it connects here to the cecum? And then when you back out of this, you go, now that's called the Taenia coli, this little longitudinal muscle that actually creates these little outpouchings that are called hostra. And that muscle goes down the middle, so I can click on it there. It even says Taenia coli. It actually shortens the colon, and that gives it these little outpouchings. So there's the ascending colon. And I really want to get back to the other view that I had originally. See if I can make it in the middle. There we go. Sorry. And then over here is the transverse colon. This is the descending colon, comes down the back. And then you can actually tell up underneath here, it's not a bad view, well, there's the muscle again. That's the sigmoid colon. Sigmoid, only humans have that. It's kind of an S curve. You can see it coming down. And then there is the rectum. Comes straight down, and then at some point it says the anal sphincter, and then the anal canal. And of course the anus is the terminal end of the alimentary canal. It's surrounded by squamous tissue. So that is the colon. Here is the colon. So here's the cecum. You know, the ileum connects right here. This is called the ascending colon. This is the transverse colon. This is called the descending colon. And then human beings have, this is called a sigmoid colon. This is the rectum. And this is the anal canal. And then the anus, which is the terminal end of the digestive tract. This muscle that goes along here is called the Intestinal Coli. There it is. This is all mesentery. These little outpouchings are called hostra. Now that says hostrum for singular. The cecum is this little cul-de-sac, which is the beginning of the colon. So the food going through here, there's no more absorbing. Water and electrolytes get absorbed. This is actually where feces forms. And it goes at a certain rate. Part of the reason that vegetables are healthy is it increases the gastric motility so that fecal material passes fairly quickly through here. If it goes too fast through this area and no water is absorbed, that's what diarrhea is. If it goes too slow and water is being absorbed to the point where it's becoming solid, that's what constipation is. So I gave you all that. I showed you the ascending colon, the transverse, and where the descending is. So here's a few characteristics, and I'll show you this on the picture. Hemorrhoids are actually these veins in what are called the anal columns. When they get enlarged, that's what hemorrhoids are. It's sometimes from pressure, and that's where the term comes from. So no digestion occurs here. It is absorption of water and electrolytes. There are a lot of vitamins that are produced in the colon from bacteria. Just another picture. So there's the ileum, the cecum, the ascending colon, the transverse, the descending colon, and then the sigmoid colon. And then the rectum, anal canal, and anus. A couple of things before we move on, which we're practically over. All right, well, I showed you where the Intestinal Coli is and the hostra are the outpouchings. There we go. The Intestinal Coli are the longitudinal muscles. That muscle is shorter, so it makes it shorten the whole colon. So that's what the outpouchings are. Now the very terminal end, and so here are the anal columns. That's where those veins I was referring to that cause hemorrhoids. The anal canal, and then this is also lined with a stratified squamous tissue. In fact, it's the non-keratinized stratified squamous, at least the inside part of that. So that's the terminal end of the digestive tract. Okay, now to end the whole thing, nice little summary. Where is it? Here. In fact, there is a chart that has them all. I believe, so it has lipids. It has, at least these are the big ones. But so here's carbohydrates. See polysaccharide. Down here it says small oligosaccharides or disaccharides, and eventually you see the monosaccharides. Proteins, here are peptides or polypeptides. Those get broken down to dipeptides. And the peptidases in the small intestine finish that off. They're the amino acids. And here are lipids. So gastric lipase, smaller lipid globules, and that's why I was looking. I thought there was a diagram that had, that's what bile does. Bile takes this big piece like that and breaks it into smaller globules. And then here's pancreatic lipase. There's actually intestinal lipase, and then you end up, these are called monoglycerides, but here are fatty acids, and then there are glycerol. So all of these are down to the smallest units from what were big molecules. I'm not worried about that. So, all right, that is it. That is the entire presentation of the digestive system. And this chart is just, if you wanted to write these in as you go through, it's just like a study guide. All right, that is it. Thanks for listening to me.
And that's the bottom line, because Stone Cold